Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2021. I hope this holiday season has offered an opportunity for each of you to relax and spend some time with those that you love. 2020 certainly was a unique year, so let's hope 2021 holds some better times for all of us. Today marks the start of a new year, so I figured we'd take a look at a tale about how a certain group of people thought the entire planet got its start. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're taking a look at the creation myth of the Old Norse people, or as some like to call them, the Vikings. While I may poke a little fun during this video, it's important to remember that this story was an actual belief, a religious tale, belonging to these Germanic tribes. Since this is the first video I've made where we take a look at old myths, I figured I'd explain why we should even bother examining mythology at all, since a negligible amount of people still believe in these stories and deities. I can give you 3 reasons why. Number 1, studying mythology allows us to understand the beliefs of these cultures, and see how these beliefs influence their culture and decisions, both in their individual lives and in how they dealt with others. 2, examining these old stories can help us identify common themes or ideas used in modern stories. Modern books, movies, and comics often draw on or are inspired by these older myths. For example, Superman, the iconic superhero, was inspired by the Greek myths surrounding the hero Heracles, or to go by his more recognizable Romanized name, Hercules. Ironically, Disney would go on to draw on the origin story of Superman and Clark Kent when making their animated movie about Hercules, so it kind of goes full circle there. Various books, like almost all the stuff written by Rick Riordan, I'm not entirely sure how to say his name, reimagine the myths through modern stories. Even some video games, like Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, and the entire God of War series draw upon old myths. And 3, myths are just interesting and fun to study. While I caution against trying to follow these stories or their teachings of these ancient cultures as though they were religious doctrine, I do think these old stories are incredibly interesting to learn about. And with that, let's take a look at today's myth. According to legends told by the Norsemen, at the beginning of time, there was only the Yawning Void, known as Knaggälve. Yes, that's how it's pronounced, Knaggälve. Now, you're going to see as I go through this story that the Norse have very unique names for things, and that's because the language of these old Germanic tribes is very different from anything spoken in Europe today, except for Icelandic, which is actually supposed to be pretty similar. But anyway, this space was initially simply filled with mists. A fog said to be so dense it was impossible to see through, not that there was anyone there to try to look through it anyway. Over time, these mists began to gather together into 2 sections. The land of fire, Muspelheim, formed out of the fog gathering to the south, and Niflheim, the land of mists and ice, formed out of the fog gathering to the north. Surtur, the demon king and lord of flame, claimed his throne at the southern end of Muspelheim, where he sat waiting for his opportunity to burn everything to cinders in Ragnarok. In the chasm that formed between these 2 realms, deep in Knaggälve, was the well of life, Hvergelmir. The waters that flowed from it were frozen into massive chunks of ice, kind of like the continental glaciers that would have been on the Earth during the Ice Age, if you've learned about that in like Earth science. These blocks of ice ground against each other, piling into a massive ice mountain above Hvergelmir, the well of life. The power of the waters that sprang from this well caused the ice to come to life, creating Ymir, the biggest giant and the father of all frost giants and giant kin. Alongside Ymir came okay, forgive me for pronunciation on this, Jöthumbla, a cow whose milk provided the sustenance needed for Ymir to live. Some say Odumbla, others say Ohumla. I've found a pronunciation that's Jöthumbla, and I'm going to go with that one. Several chunks of ice broke off of Ymir, one forming a giant, a rime giant, the father of witches, warlocks, giants, and trolls. The remaining ice provided sustenance for Ythumbla, as she licked it and found the power of life contained inside it from the well of life. Now, let's just take a moment here. According to Norse mythology, the first beings to exist were a fire demon, a frost giant, two pretty awesome sounding things, and a cow. Those are the first three. Told you this was a unique culture. Also, you gotta love that their creation myth contained inside it a direct reference to Ragnarok, which is the name the Norsemen gave to the end of the world. The story about the creation of everything contains in it a direct link to the end of the world. This is why I love the Norse culture so much. Okay, now I need to make a quick note before I move on. The Norse gods are divided into two categories. There's the Aesir and the Veneer. The Aesir were believed to be the heavenly gods with powers over things like the sky and storms, and they lived in Asgard, the higher realm. You might know about it from the Marvel movies. Similar, but not exactly the same as it's depicted there. On the other hand, the Vanir were believed to be the earthly gods linked to the forces of nature on the planet and living on Earth. Now, they didn't live among humans, but they lived on the planet. Now, with that out of the way, back to the story. So we left off with Ymir drinking the milk of Ythumbla as she licks the ice that fell from Ymir. Two of them subsisted like that for a while before something started to form out of the ice Ythumbla was licking. At first there was only a tuft of hair sticking out from the ice, then an entire head was uncovered, and eventually an entire man was freed from the ice. His name was Buri, and he was the first of the Aesir. Buri somehow, it's never really explained, but somehow had a son named Bor. No one knows who his mother was. Bor married a frost giant named Besla. Bor and Besla go on to have 3 sons, one of whom you may recognize. Their names were Vili, Ve, and Odin, with Odin being the most powerful of the 3. These 3 looked upon Ymir as a great and terrible villain for some reason. I'm sure there was a story that explains this, but I haven't been able to find it. And they set out to kill him. If you haven't caught on yet, some things in these old myths just kind of happen. That's not specific to Norse mythology, but it does happen a lot in their stories. It might be because of the way that Norse myths were recorded, where it was like through poetic retellings, nothing was really written down until Christians came in and started to intermingle with their culture, and myths might have changed and things were lost. So that might have something to do with it. So, Odin, Vili, and Ve go to war with Ymir. The battle was said to be great and terrible, with the blows from the gods shaking the realms. When Ymir fell before the 3 godly brothers, the gods forced his giant body into Ginnungagap, between Muspelheim and Niflheim, and it became Midgard, the very world we live on today. Now, I'll give you a quick heads up. This next part gets a little nasty. I mean, if you're squeamish, you might not want to watch this next part. You can just click off the video. His ice blood poured from his body, becoming the rivers and oceans. His skin and muscle became the soil. His hair became all the plants on the earth, trees and bushes and all that. His teeth became the rocks and gravel, and his bones became mountains. The gods fashioned his skull into a great dome called the sky, and got 4 dwarves to hold it up at the 4 corners of the earth to the north, south, east, and west. They gathered sparks from Muspelheim and fashioned them into stars in the sky, then fashioned molten gold from that same fiery realm into a bright golden sun chariot driven by the goddess Sol, who is, I guess, just there now. Alongside her was the silver moon chariot driven by Mani, who again, I guess, is just there now. Both of them were given their paths to travel across the sky each day, and their daily treks provided light across the land. Their jobs are not without danger, though, as they were each pursued across the sky by separate wolves that were trying to devour them. And eventually, in the story of Ragnarok, the wolves do catch Sol and Mani and devour them, and the sun and the moon are swallowed up. So again, we see a direct reference to Ragnarok in this creation myth. Continuing with their work, the gods fashioned clouds in the sky from the brains of Ymir, then wrapped the sea in a ring around the earth and planted the mighty ash tree Yggdrasil, the world tree, to hold it all up and provide support for the dwarves holding up the sky. Finally, the gods formed the first man and woman, Ask and Embla, from 2 tree trunks, leaving them to live on this newly created land together. Yes, according to this myth, everything in the natural world stems from the dead body of a frost giant, the first frost giant. So, fun times. There you have it. That's the origin of the world according to the ancient Norse. Remember, this was a story believed by the Old Norse, but it is not a historically accurate story. I don't want you to go around thinking that when you look at a mountain range, you're looking at the broken spine of a god, a godly frost giant, I should say. I don't want to confuse anybody. I know I usually talk about history stories here. This is a myth. This is a story. I don't want to confuse anybody. Now, if you choose to believe it, that's up to you. But I want to be clear. This is a myth that I'm telling you. Now, let's take a look at the question of the day. Today's question is, why do you think ice played such an important role in the Norse creation story? Now remember, the Norsemen were living in the frozen north at the time, so keep that in mind. Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more, you can always check out my sources cited in the descriptions of all of my videos. I leave sources of where I get my information from. I try to keep it to, what's the best way to phrase this? I try to keep it layman friendly, I guess you could say. I try to use sources that are more accessible than higher level academic sources, so that if you do want to read more about it, you can always just go check them out. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more interesting or strange history stories. I hope you have a great rest of your day, you lovely, lovely people.